Nearly 2 decades ago, engineers in Shanghai set out to do something almost nobody believed was possible. They wanted to build a modern passenger jet from scratch, one that could carry ordinary people safely at 35,000 feet and compete with the biggest names in aviation. Experts scoffed, analysts predicted failure, and yet, today, that same country has an airliner flying real passengers on real routes, one that Boeing and Airbus can no longer afford to ignore. So how did this happen, and is it actually as good as its builders claim? To understand why this stunned the aviation world, you need to understand how difficult it is to build a commercial airliner at all. It isn't like building a car. A modern passenger plane has to survive freezing temperatures at cruising altitude, then land in scorching heat an hour later. It has to endure decades of pressurization cycles without a single crack forming. Every wire, every bolt, every line of software must be tested not just to work, but to fail safely if something goes wrong. That's why for over 50 years, only two companies have truly mastered this at scale: Boeing and Airbus. Building a new aircraft from nothing costs tens of billions of dollars and takes over a decade even for companies with a century of experience. Several countries have tried to break in before, almost all failed. So when China announced it wanted a real seat at this table, most assumed it was setting itself up for the same fate. But China had real reasons to try. Its airlines were growing faster than almost anywhere on Earth, and every plane in those fleets was Boeing or Airbus, sending billions of dollars abroad every year. In an industry increasingly shaped by geopolitics, that dependency looked less like convenience and more like vulnerability. So the goal became clear: build domestic capability, even if it took decades. The first real step wasn't the plane everyone talks about today. It was a smaller aircraft called the ARJ-21, now rebranded the C909, a roughly 90-seat regional jet that served as a training ground. Through it, Chinese engineers learned the basics of certification, testing, and manufacturing at scale, skills that simply didn't exist in the country before. That success set the stage for something far more ambitious. That project was the C919, launched in 2008 under the state-owned Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, or COMAC. The goal? Build a narrow-body jet to rival the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320, the two best-selling aircraft families in history. Critics called it absurd for a country with no experience designing aircraft at this scale. For a while, they looked right. The project was supposed to move fast. Instead, one obstacle after another forced engineers back to the drawing board: structural weaknesses, software rewrites, missed deadlines, each one fueling louder skepticism. So what happened when it finally flew? The C919 completed its first flight in May 2017, nearly a decade after the program began. That was still a long way from carrying passengers. Years of grueling certification followed, stress testing every system to prove the plane was safe. China's regulator, the CAAC, finally granted its type certificate in September 2022. The first delivery came that December, and commercial service began in May 2023. Since then, China Eastern, Air China, and China Southern have flown it across dozens of domestic routes, carrying millions of passengers, and it has even flown beyond mainland China, connecting Shanghai to Hong Kong. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Having China's own certificate is a major achievement, but it isn't the finish line. To sell aircraft internationally, most airlines need approval from Europe's EASA or America's FAA. Without it, global airlines won't buy, and lessors won't finance. COMAC once hoped for European approval by 2025. That target has clearly slipped. Regulators now say full validation could take 3 to 6 years, possibly not arriving before 2028, and potentially later still. European test pilots did begin flying the C919 in Shanghai in late 2025 into 2026. Real progress, but a reminder of how thorough this process is. In the meantime, COMAC has been targeting Southeast Asian markets, where some regulators may approve the aircraft on their own standards, building international experience while the slower Western process continues. So how does it actually compare to the 737 MAX and A320neo? In size, capacity, and range, it's genuinely comparable, built for the same short and medium-haul routes that dominate global air travel. But the honest picture includes real limits. Production has ramped up far slower than hoped, delivery numbers well below early targets. The aircraft still depends heavily on Western engines and systems, a real geopolitical risk if tensions escalate. And without Western certification, it can't yet compete in the markets that matter most globally. Some analysts see this as proof it's still fundamentally a domestic project. Others argue every new entrant faces this exact climb, and steady progress is what a serious competitor looks like. COMAC isn't stopping here. It's already developing a wide-body jet, the C929, aimed at competing with the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 on long-haul routes. That program was originally a joint venture with Russia, but it collapsed amid sanctions, forcing COMAC to rebuild it alone. Recent reports point to accelerating progress, wind tunnel testing, and avionics partnership, though a confirmed domestic engine remains unresolved. Most estimates put first flight around 2030. If it succeeds, it would mark an even bigger leap, signaling China isn't just trying to participate in aviation, but to become a genuine third pillar alongside Boeing and Airbus. So where does that leave us? The C919 is neither the failure early skeptics predicted, nor the finished triumph some headlines suggest. It's something more interesting. A working, certified, revenue-generating aircraft that proves China can build a modern jet, while still facing the same long road toward global acceptance every serious new entrant has walked. Whether or not it eventually earns a seat beside Boeing and Airbus in Europe and the Americas, something has already changed. Airlines worldwide now know there's a third option in development, backed by a government willing to fund it patiently through every setback. And in an industry where the biggest question has always been who controls the sky, that alone is enough to make the rest of the aviation world pay very close attention to what China builds next.